Welcome to episode number 82 of The Closing Table. I'm your host, Tamera, and today's special guest is going to talk about the ins and outs of land sales right after this.
Welcome to The Closing Table with host Tamera, where we break down how to be successful in real estate and what it's really like to work in the real estate business. This is The Closing Table with Lawyer's Title.
Today's special guest is Jason Northcutt. He is the Texas land agent and team leader of North Realty Group. He's also the senior VP of the Land and Ranch Division with At Properties Christie's International Real Estate located in Frisco, Texas. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, and you just had a change. You just moved over to At Properties, what, a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah,
this new endeavor?
Right after Labor Day. Yeah.
Okay. And tell me what the new endeavor entails.
Long story short, Love Compass, great brokerage. We weren't looking to make a change, and a good friend of mine sent me an email about 4 o'clock in the morning. Says, "Hey, we're looking for someone that can help run our division. I know you're happy where you're at." It's what I call the passive aggressive email.
Sure.
And so we started talking about it, and basically the senior vice president land and ranch is my goal is to help develop, train, and increase our numbers with At Properties when it comes to land and ranch and development. So. We're going to be in the Frisco office, and we're going to be, obviously talking to other agents that specialize like I do.
Yeah.
Showing them, what At Properties Christie's International has to offer. But also it's more of a chance to bring, it's a cliche of bringing luxury and land together, right? And showing people that land isn't just dirt. It's not just a tree. It's not just a tumbleweed, flying across a road at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in West Texas. So it's going to be an interesting thing. It's still weird to have that title because it's not something
it's new.
Was looking for. It wasn't anything I had any resumes out for. It literally was a knock on the door, and we opened the door and had that discussion for a couple of months. So,
well, let's back up a little bit because when anybody talks about land sales, you're clearly the first person that always comes to my mind, and I know that's the case with a lot of other people in DFW real estate,
and
right?
It's appreciated.
So what made you want to focus primarily on land sales and become a land sales expert?
Honestly, it was almost kind of a chance. Long story short, I failed miserably my first year in real estate as a realtor.
I don't think there's anything unusual about that.
No, there's not, except I filed bankruptcy at the end of 16.
Oh.
And I didn't renew my association dues at the beginning of 17. So I became inactive for a few months. And I knew that this was something I wanted to do. I'd already been in lending for 13 years. I knew the industry as a whole.
Sure.
And so my wife, my fiance at the time, she's like, I know that you're miserable doing what you're doing. I went and helped a mortgage company with their recruiting. But so renewed my license, and literally we started getting the ball rolling, and I was out flipping chicken on the grill, scrolling through Facebook, drinking a beer, and I saw this post from a land investor who buys land, large chunks of it, divides it up, and then resells it. And so they basically said, "Hey, we have a lot of business right now. We're looking for help." He said probably 100, 150 people. I was the only one that called them.
Really?
Yep. He said they left enough information online to figure out who they were, and I was the only one that reached out personally. And that night we had dinner. A couple of days later, we signed 13 subdivisions. And that relationship started in 17 and ran all the way up till just recently, last couple of years. They decided to get their own license. They kind of went in a different direction. We're still great friends. We still collaborate on stuff and consult each other on stuff. So, but it was literally by chance. And, but I've always, I make a joke, I'm a city kid, but a country at heart.
Yeah.
I grew up in the city, but our family is very country. My grandmother's from Wolf City. I grew up, I learned how to ride a horse, with no saddle on, and my dad slapped its ass and off the field.
That's one way to learn.
That's what, I'm screaming at my dad, "I hate you." So, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm flying through, with a pony that's half wild, freaking out. But that's just how our family was, how we were. And so it just became a natural fit. And also because it's not the same as going to look at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's not the same thing as going to Robinson Ridge or Stonebriar or Stonebridge or Trinity Falls. Every property is unique. Every property is different. And everything is always a different challenge every day. And I think that's why I really fell in love with it. But also I do like being out in the country and getting a little dirty.
Well, and I want you to explain what you explained to me yesterday, because like a day in the life of Jason Northcutt, the amount of driving and locations that you go to in one day, because these places,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not driving to Dallas and parking it for the day, right? It's not a small little area where you're landlocked. You're going to the outskirts of the Metroplex. So do you remember what you told me yesterday about your day?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, just to give you an idea, I drive a 2021 Silverado. I bought it with 4 miles on it. I almost have 95,000 miles.
A 2021, and you have 91,000 miles
Almost
on it?
95.
Almost 95. So you put 91,000 miles on it in 3 years-ish.
Yeah, that's
incredible.
So, we were talking the other day, and so typically, my day could be anywhere from I'm not going anywhere and I'm in the office doing admin, but then there's days, it's a 2-hour drive one way. I'm down there for an hour and a half. I go visit 3 or 4 of our properties and drive back. So it's, I leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, get back at 8 o'clock at night, and put 300, 400, 500 miles on the truck. We did that. We have property from here to Kempner, which is on the other side of Killeen, then down to Burnett, then over to where did I go from there? Another city south of San Antonio.
Oh yeah, you
back up
had
to
to
College
explain
Station, and
where
then,
some of these people
and then
places
back
were.
up to Dallas, and that was a 2-day trip. Because when we say we service Texas when it comes to land, we literally service Texas when it comes to land.
Well, and that kind of brings me, to some of my other questions, because, we do see some of our realtor friends trying to be DFW experts, right? And we think that's a little bit challenging, where it's better for a realtor to kind of narrow in and become an expert of a smaller pocket of DFW and really dive into the community and become a community expert, right? But that's not the case with land listings, because they are in these big geographical areas that are outside of the city. So managing your day becomes a different kind of a challenge than a typical realtor.
Yeah.
But what are some of the most common issues you see with like the general realtor population taking on land listings or sales,
I think as a realtor, to backtrack just a little bit, you're talking about narrowing down to be what we call the mayor of your town. Right?
The mayor of your town.
You want to be the mayor of your town.
Yes.
And I 100% agree with that. I think that if you're going to live in a specific area and you want to represent that area, you really need to become the mayor of the town. You need to know anything and everything. Like a lot of my posts, they're for development. It's a lot of McKinney, Salina, Prosper, everything within
I do see a lot of your posts being up north.
Because a lot of the people that we talk to or the agents that we interact with are more local, right? So we want them to know what's kind of going on development-wise. But there's an old saying that riches are in the niches. And in real estate, that is extremely
Wait a minute. There's somebody else that uses that saying, there's riches in the niches.
It's the truth, though.
That's really familiar to me for some reason.
But, going back to, real estate agents and realtors taking on land listings, I think it's great that they're willing to do that, but they do need to work with somebody who knows it. And the reason why, and here's a great example, is I hear people all the time, they're like, hey, I think I'm going to buy some land up by Pottsboro. And I say, okay, are you going to be between 377 and Preston, or are you thinking more east of Preston? And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you go between 377 and 82 to about where Preston Road, Pottsboro Airport is, you have nothing but pipelines. So if you're wanting to buy 100 acres, that's cool. Build one house and you're good to go. But if you're wanting to do development, it ain't going to happen. So that's what I mean by you need to know those areas, right? So even though we're spread out geographically, we know the areas because we study the maps. So when a realtor is wanting to work with land, they really need to reach out to someone in their office who has worked with land on a regular basis, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And I mean a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah. We had, prime example, 200 acres out south of Decatur. Prime cattle land, great grazing, has the East Trinity Fork River that runs through a portion of it. So it kind of, it did flood. And we put it on contract. Didn't think anything of it. And they did what's called a phase 1 study. And that study came back and showed that we were in, part of it was in wetlands. So wetlands are protected areas classified. It could be like a plant or an animal. So there's certain classifications. We didn't know that. So here comes the Army Corps engineer.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that was fun. So my seller doesn't live locally. He goes, do you mind meeting him out there? I'm like, not a problem at all. So, I met with the engineers out there and we walked the property and they took a look at it. They gave us their opinion that was based back in 1980 when there wasn't any actually on the ground. It doesn't look like anything was destroyed. They go, but also let's go ahead and walk the rest of the property. I'm like, oh crap. So come to find out, someone had dug a portion of the East Trinity, which is a small creek that feeds into it, pulled some dirt out. And they're like, did you guys do this? I'm like, nope, we didn't touch it. That wasn't us. They said, okay, whoever buys it, you need to tell them they can't put it back. They
can't put it back.
They cannot put the dirt back because it could shift the way the flow goes. So,
okay, yes.
So those are little things that unless you know that, you know, who to call, as an agent or realtor, and this is the first time you've done a land deal, you're probably going to freak the heck out.
And I don't have a lot of experience with the Army Corps of Engineers, but I've heard enough about them. Isn't their general answer no?
Yes.
So whatever the question is.
No, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Because their main goal, there's lots of goals that they have, but a lot of it does have to come down to environmental safety and protocol, right? They want to make certain that what a stream feeds into can't affect someone else down the line. Meaning, for example, not putting the dirt back. If they were to put that dirt back and it shifted the creek just even a foot or two, that could cause either flooding down the road, literally down the line, or it could back up water, cause flooding on the other side.
I learned this from Yellowstone.
So they're, yeah, you know, so,
Seriously.
but no, but that by you, so, you know, Army Corps engineers, you know, the point with them is we just came from a very respectful, hey, we need help here. We're trying to figure this out. Can you help us out? They came out and looked at it. And at the end of the day, we were good to go. Because they can, you know, the damage that was done, they can't really say if there was or wasn't actually a wetland there because it was from 1981, 82. And so they gave us the blessings and said, you're good to go. So
that's incredibly interesting. And what was the time frame from the moment you decided that you needed to call them out to the moment you were able to got the go ahead? Because I hear these are pretty long time frames.
Yeah, that was a couple of months. I mean, it's not a short time frame. I mean, another great example, and this is more, you know, dealing with land and oil, right? Texas is an oil state.
Yep.
Right. So we were selling a piece of land. Agent takes his buyer out there. He calls me and says, hey, Jason, did you have an oil leak? I'm like, what? What do you mean I have what? Say that again.
An oil leak.
An oil leak. So every time the donkey came up, I call them donkeys, the derricks came up. So basically it come up and the oil would squirt out. And so I called the seller. Seller immediately got in his truck, went out there, turned electricity off. And it's not even his pump. It's leased by somebody else from when he purchased it. And this goes to why it's extremely important for another agent who's never done this to work with agents to do is I immediately knew who to call. I found the leases, but come to find out the numbers didn't work. The location was a bad location. So because of experience, I called the Railroad Commission, talked to the regional person who oversees that region, talked to him. He goes, yes, I know who you're talking about. We've sent cease and desist. If they don't respond, we'll remediate it. Within about 2 weeks, the equipment that was out there was seized by the state and taken away. And the cap and that oil drill, the oil, all of it was capped because, yeah. So that's why I say,
what?
Well, nothing. There's still a lease there, but the state won't allow them. The person who owns the lease can no longer access the plug basically because of their failure to answer the letters from the railroad.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, you know, I have no issues with agents going out there and wanting to try land, but work with someone that has done this because, you know, a residential lot that's 60 foot wide, 120 foot deep, that's in a subdivision is not the same as a 1 acre in Van Alstyne or Anna or Farmersville or, you know, name the city. It's a totally different beast, you know.
Man, that's a lot to process because I'm starting to kind of think like it really should be someone who specializes in that area to try to take that kind of listing on.
And technically,
and they just collect a referral fee.
Right. So the technical answer is they're supposed to. The TREC set out a rule a couple of years ago that they have to be competent in what they're doing. And if they've never done it before, the broker is supposed to mentor them over so many deals. Well, that's up to the broker to do that.
Sure.
So, but how many agents are going to the broker saying, hey, I have a listing. Can you help me?
Yeah, no.
I'm not trying to pick on them. We think we can do it all.
I mean, right? I combed your Facebook page yesterday, you know. I am the FBI.
Well, I always tell people my Facebook page is wide open.
No, it is wide open. And I saw that there was another common vein of conversation on your social media pages about how the listing is presented on MLS. So showcasing the property in a way that is going to attract a buyer or educate a buyer, I think is also something that you seem to talk about quite a bit as an issue when a traditional realtor that isn't as versed in land tries to take on the land listing.
I was thinking about that because we talked about this yesterday, you and I, we're kind of talking about the show today. And I was trying to figure out the best analogy I can think of. There's a couple different ones. If, as a human, you and I, right, we're male, female, whatever, we have attractions, right? You see a dress or a shirt or shoes, or if you're single, another man, another woman, whatever, right? We're always attracted. We're visual creatures by nature. And I want you to think about this. When you're scrolling through Facebook or something, usually whatever that image is powerful enough to make you stop scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that with land. Think about that with houses. Whenever you are representing $1 million property and they have one photo and it's just a red outline that they drew with their finger,
right?
How attractive is that as a consumer to stop and look? Go, what's that?
No, I mean, I have the perfect counter to that. I mean, my Facebook page is all real estate professionals. I probably have 10 non-real estate professionals as friends on my Facebook, right? And I've talked about this several times. Like, because I'm friends with all of you, I see all the things that you post on social media, right? And very rarely do I see some sort of advertisement about a property that makes me stop.
Yep. I mean, it's the honest truth.
It is the honest truth.
And so what we see with land is I'm trying to bring again, I go back to the luxury meets land part, is it's not something that has to be luxurious like $1 million piece of land. It could be a $50,000 lake lot out in Cedar Creek, whatever.
Is there a $50,000 land lot in Cedar Creek anymore?
I have 20 of them, maybe that are $6,000.
Oh, really?
Each.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I digress. Keep going.
But it's a good point is that, when you're representing a client, whether it's a $5,000 listing or it's a $5 million listing, it needs to be presented professionally, just like you would do a house, right? Whether it's, there's our people that still do a $50,000 house and take pictures with their cell phone, but I digress.
Yeah.
But
I've seen that
the
too.
point is that we are professionals. We need to treat every property professionally, right? We need to market it professionally. We need to have great visuals for them professionally. Now, do I fail at that sometimes? Yes. Right. We may have to get a listing up, but we don't have all the assets for it yet.
Sure. Because
the seller's like, no, I need to get it up right now. And I'm like, well, you just told me you bought it yesterday. I've got to get photos done. No,
well, and new construction is a prime example of that.
Right. Well, even new construction, they still have renderings. They still want you to figure out to stop and look at something.
Sure.
So, that is kind of a contentious point with me, is that if you're going to take a land listing, treat it professionally. And it's okay if you don't have all the tools. We use a lot of different tools for land, right? And it's okay if you don't use them. Reach out to somebody that in your office that does use them, or reach out to me. I mean, I create maps for friends all the time, with professional outlines that showing them where the flood zones are, if there's any pipelines, transmission lines. I have no problem doing that, because at the end of the day, it just elevates us as an industry to look better, right? So, I mean, but yeah, that is kind of a contentious point with me.
Well, and we might have touched on some of these things already. I know you're putting together a class. Mm-hmm. Do we have a title? Land 101.
Just pretty much Land 101.
Okay.
So a friend of mine last year had me do a couple of classes for his outreach group, and we packed the whole room, and it was only supposed to be an hour, and it ended up like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I've been talking about this for a while, and you've seen a few pictures on Facebook. I've got the notes down. Probably today or tomorrow, I will set a physical hard date, because if I don't,
you'll never do it.
I'll never do it, just because I want. In my brain, like I put out there one day, hey, can you guys want to do a full 8 hours? And they're like, yeah, no. So
no, I think this is a 2-hour gig.
At minimum, at max would be a 2 hour, maybe an hour of teaching, and then 30, 40 minutes of answering the questions. But I want to bring just those questions that a lot of agents have that are afraid to ask or don't know who to ask about how land works, what to look for, some of the questions you want to have answered, because. The biggest thing that we get is, hey, is this zoned? I'm like, it's in the county. There's no zoning in counties.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, I said, but you still want to check with the county to make certain you can build what you want to build. You can't, they may not want you to put a slaughterhouse in.
Okay. So is that one of the top 3 things that you're going to discuss in this class?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we're going to discuss is identifying the land, things to ask, the basic questions to ask, is it deed restrictions? Is there any zoning or unzoning? Is it county or city? Is it the ETJ? Is there utilities available? If so, what are they? Can you get a water meter? If there is no sewer, is it capable of having a septic system? Is there flooding, pipelines, stuff like that? So there's more than just the top 3, but yeah.
That is more than just the top 3, but
it's basic.
There's just so much that goes into this.
Well, when we do a site evaluation as a realtor, as someone that specializes in land, the things that I'm looking for, and I joke, is it's always the same. I pull the map up, I find the boundary of the property, and the first thing I look at is flooding, pipelines, transmission lines, and then from there, depending on the location, I will look at and see if there's any wind farms, solar farms, if there's any substations, meaning the big electrical substations that big boxes of electricity and everything. Are either on or near the property, because that affects value, right? So if we have someone that's wanting to buy 100 acres and 98 of it's in a flood zone, it's probably not going to be great to subdivide, because then you're going to have elevation certifications. Some counties won't even let you build in a flood zone anymore, just because of insurance cost. Well, they will, but you have to bring your elevation up higher than the floodplain. So, which is that's more cost that's going to be involved on the buy side. So then that affects your total overall, cost per acre. So
is your site evaluation something that you do before you go and sit down with the buyer or the seller?
I typically do. Yeah.
So have they typically, do people just come to you and say, I want to buy land. I don't know where, I don't know what I want. Or are they typically somewhat educated already in what they're looking for?
50-50.
50-50. Okay.
Yeah,
and then if they are educated, the site evaluation is what you kind of walk through with them in the beginning.
Yeah.
Is that your listing, kind of your listing presentation, for lack of a better term?
I guess they always talk about having this presentation and this presentation. I'm like, I just show up.
Yeah.
My listing.
You've clearly done some research to prep for the appointment.
Yeah.
So that what you just talked about, is that your research? Is that your site evaluation is what you prep for before you?
Yeah. So like if you came to me and said, hey, Jason, I know nothing about land, but I want to buy 10 acres. I say, okay, great. Have you identified any areas? No. Okay. What are the characteristics you're looking for? Flat, open, plain, Jane, do you want trees? Do you want a pond? Do you want a stream? Because then because of the geographical area, this comes down to what we're talking about earlier is, yes, I do the whole state, but I'm very well geographically versed in this area. So then I can say, well, if you really want rolling hills, but you want to be in Grayson County, I'd say east of 75, North Van Alstyne area. It's nice rolling hills. As you get out towards right, it kind of flattens out a little bit. If you want more flat, but you want to be in Grayson County, you want to be on the west side of 75. It's a little bit flatter.
I want to buy 10 acres as an investment.
Okay.
Don't care what the land looks like. Just want it to be something future, something desired in the future.
Then my next question is, what's your budget?
What's your budget?
What's your budget? Because the price per acre, the closer and I know we're kind of segueing off the original question, but to your point, the closer you're into major development, the price shoots up, right? Then you're going to be looking at a 5 to 7 year hold possibly to recoup and actually have a 20% or higher profit margin.
Okay, so what does a 5 to 7 year hold look like? What cost can I expect from a 5 to 7 year hold?
5 to 7 years, if you're going to hold something and it's going to be 10 acres or larger, make sure you have your ag exemptions in place.
So I need some bees.
Yeah, Collin County is down to 5 acres.
Bees, cows, something.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that way it keeps your tax down. And outside of that, it's just maintenance. I mean, really raw.
What does that mean?
Maintenance could be mowing, making sure that's mowed down. You're walking out to the 6 foot tall grass, right? If there's any fencing that borders other properties, you want to make sure your fencing is proper, right? So especially if you're running cattle or if your neighbor is running cattle, or horses, you want to make sure your fencing is correct, right? Or if there isn't any fencing and your neighbors don't care about having any fencing, no one cares. But if you have say 10 acres out of 100 and it's not fenced and you all of a sudden want to run cattle, guess what you're going to have to do?
Yeah, you got to have
fencing up unless the neighbor says, yeah, you can run them on our property. So those are some of just the minor costs.
Plus the taxes. Plus
taxes. I mean, there's not
anything else?
No, not really. I mean, I do recommend if, having some sort of, if you have any type of structures on there, put some sort of insurance on there, right? Just because if something was to happen, physical structures are covered. But, if 10 acres and there's nothing on there, floods, did you lose any value? No.
Nope. There's nothing there.
Now, where you do lose value, and this, I told you, I warned you yesterday, this goes down to a rabbit hole.
That's okay. I'm here for it.
If you have 10 acres that's next to a creek and it floods, you may just went from 10 acres to 8.
Because it stays underwater.
Right. Or because the flooding eroded part of your property.
Yeah.
Which is called riparian rights. That's a whole different subject of does your property.
I don't even know what you just said.
So water, basically water. So riparian. So does your property end at where the creek is, or does it go to the middle of the creek or the other side of the creek? So literally, if the creek varies in distance, you could increase your land size and decrease your land size.
Makes sense.
So those are some of the things you watch out for. But no, when you look at investment, so when we do the consult and they say, okay, identified an area, let's say it was Dorchester of all places, right? So you're
Where's
like,
that?
just north of Gunter.
Thank you.
From Preston. Now,
Oh, wait a minute. I keep hearing about Dorchester.
So Dorchester's under fire right now because they want to put a cement plant out there. And of course, people are like, oh, no, I don't want a cement plant.
Is anything there?
No.
Yeah.
There's a sign and a house.
We have a cement plant not far from my house. I could walk to it.
Yeah, exactly. So then you say, okay, identify it. So this next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see what's available on the market that meets your criteria. And then from there, let's say we identify a couple of pieces. From there, I'm going to go into, okay, does it flood? Are there pipelines? Is there any type of easements that could cause you not to have an increase in value? So those are the things that we're going to look at on the investment side of it, right? And then what we would also look at is I'll run an analysis over, say, a 5 to 8 year period to see what the appreciation or depreciation for that area has been for just raw land, and then calculate, okay, here's where you can projected growth, right? Projected growth is never guaranteed. We don't know, right? But
wouldn't everybody love to project the next South Lake?
But, oh God, South Lake, Frisco. Just think early 2000 when the mall opened, there was nothing in Frisco.
Salina.
I mean, no offense, but Frisco still had the big water tower that said, for however long. I mean, think about that. I mean, just Frisco alone. But anyways, so those are the things that we're going to look at. And then, we're going to look at analysis, like I said, 5 to 7 years. What has the appreciation or depreciation value been? What's been on the market? What's come off the market? So you kind of predict. But that's what we call land banking. So what you're wanting to do is
land banking.
Yep. It's called land banking. It's buy the land, you hold it, you sell it. So think about this. We sold a piece of land, 20 acres. I don't know what it resold for, but I think we sold it for like $350.
An acre or total?
Total. It's like 20 acres right off of 121 going out of Anna.
Okay.
I think they resold it for like $1 million plus. Yeah. I mean, that's a big example of investment.
How long did they hold it?
They held it for about 4 years, maybe.
That's 4 years. 4 years.
Yeah. So now if you're coming to me as an investor saying, hey, Jason, I'm trying, we're working with a partner now that we're trying to identify 90 to 100 plus acres that we can do low density development in. So low density being 1 acre.
Okay.
Okay. So if you think high density is your subdivisions, it's packing 300. Great example with the post I made yesterday about the new rental properties coming to Salina. That's a high density, right? That's 400 properties, 400 houses packed into 40 acres. That's
I've got to look at the cross streets on that because I didn't look very closely at it yesterday.
Parvin in 1385, I think. I'd have to double check. Anyways, so once we do that, then we say, okay, well, where are we looking at where we're trying to identify? We identify the land, but not only do we do the same things I just told you about, flood pipelines, all that, but then we're also looking at what is what we call I call it ingress and egress. It's basically who lives in and works out, meaning you're driving to, say, Dallas, but you live in Farmersville. So you live there because you want the simpler life, but you're driving into Dallas to work. Or do you work locally? So we look at those numbers to see what the traffic count, what's coming to the area. And then from there, we do the same analysis. We look at, what has been the last 5 to 7 years for 1 acre homes that have sold. And then we also look at what the raw value would be. So that way they can calculate, okay, do we need to be price point wise when we're developing? So most builders will tell you they want to be 20% in on the land purchase. So if it's $1 million, the $1 million house, they really don't want to be more than 20% in, right? Because the average builder is about, I want to say 12 to 14% profit. So if they're overpaying for the land, they have to decrease somewhere to build $1 million house, right?
Right.
So those are the things that we look at. That's why I say it's 50-50. It just really comes down to who's coming knocking at our door. So,
what areas of DFW do you see the most land acquisition taking place right now?
Still Collin County, Grayson County.
Okay.
I haven't paid too much attention to the west side of town, Fort Worth area.
Okay.
But if you look at geographically, Salina's still a hotbed.
It's so expensive though. When I talked to the former EDC director, she said, I asked her, is Salina an affordable place to live? And she said no.
No. 5 years ago it was.
Yeah.
6 years ago it was.
Yeah.
So if most people don't realize this, but Salina actually has more land size, mass wise, than McKinney.
It's 80 square miles.
Yeah.
Bigger than Frisco.
Yeah. So if you think about that for a second, if they were to fully develop it, they would be larger than Frisco and larger than McKinney.
It's really interesting that because I live in Salina, right? And I bought there in 2018.
Okay.
So I've done very well on my property. And
Those are taxes. So.
Yeah, well, I also live in a pit. So yes, my taxes have been high. Thank you for the bigger homestead exemption.
So if you have a PID, you've been there in 18, you're probably Mustang Lakes area.
No, I actually live in Glen Crossing, which is just north of Light Farms.
Okay. Yeah.
Smaller community.
I always forget that one's up there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it's a smaller community. I was probably number 8 on my street.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, so I was one of the first people there. I lived through all the construction.
So now you have the new retail going in, you have the new apartments, the new storage unit, the new bridge over the
hospital,
the new hospital. Yeah, you got it all.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved up there, we had Domino's and literally no way to get food except for Berkshire's.
But think about it. So Prosper,
I know.
same thing. Salina, same thing.
I knew exactly what was going to happen. I bought there very intentionally.
North McKinney, all the way up till 15 was the same way. There was just nothing in North
There was
McKinney.
nothing. I mean, look, when I was working for Arch Foundation Repair back in 12, 13, I mean, I would drive up to the Keller. There is a Keller Williams office in Salina that's been there for like 100 years, I feel like.
North County. I
yes.
think, yeah.
And it was a barn. It was a barn. I drove up a dirt road to a barn to get there.
I can see that.
I literally called my friends and said, I have no idea where I am. And now I live there. But I mean, I feel like obviously the migration is going north, right? I bought a rental in Sherman for that exact, we knew that what was going to happen up in Sherman also. So the migration, and I have neighbors that have already sold their house and moved to Gunner because they want more space and more land and they feel too crowded in Salina, if you can believe that.
I was joking with someone the other day. I said, if you want a small town, you're going to have to move to Oklahoma at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, being honest. Now, there's still small towns, but they're going to be
not for long.
Not for long.
Not for long.
I would say, I hate to say it's a fault because it's not really a fault, but when you have a city that's willing to increase its tax base to have better schools, you attract more people.
Right. Well,
that is what
it's really
it is.
Interesting to watch the push-pull like on our neighborhood Facebook page because, I moved there very intentionally. I knew what was going to happen to Salina. I have no... those parkways presenting a unique challenge for me right now. But other than that, I was prepared for
at least it's a cement road.
I literally tell people my appointment time is an estimated time of arrival now. Yeah. Like I don't really know when I'm going to be there, and I apologize because I don't like that. I feel like I'm a professional and I want to be on time to places, but literally the challenges of trying to get in and out of Salina, it's just since May we've been incredibly handcuffed trying to deal with it. But like I said, I knew that was going to happen. It's the interesting push-pull of the neighborhood where they're like, well, we just built a new school, so now your kids are going to this school, and they're like, we don't want to do that. And I said, well, that was kind of you kind of had to understand that was going to happen when you moved in here, right?
And I think now this is as a parent with kids in Prosper. I think that Prosper's to a certain degree, if they've been in that school for a while, they should give them the option as a waiver to stay. That's my
like grandfather them in.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason, like for example, our daughter. So we live in North McKinney, north of the hospital, off of 380, right?
Yeah,
but we're Prosper ISD. We're not even close to Prosper.
No, you're not.
City limits. We're like in McKinney.
You're McKinney,
right? We're past Tucker Hill.
Yeah.
So we went to Rogers. And then the next year, Hayes opened up, and we drove by Rogers to take our child to Hayes, which is in Frisco.
Yeah, so, I hear you.
So that's why I can see where the neighbors kind of have that fighting. But you were talking about growth. So Salina is obviously a huge hotbed right now. There's lots of talk about Gunter. The issue with Gunter is it's small. Think Van Alstyne. Love Van Alstyne, love Gunter.
No, literally, you drive through, you blink and you miss that.
Small towns that have a very small city limit footprint. So what's going to end up happening, and I use Van Alstyne as an example, is anybody who's tried to develop within the city of Van Alstyne it's a nightmare because they just don't have a lot of land and they're very restrictive. So
aren't they incredibly slow about build out also?
That too. But if you look at what happens outside of Van Alstyne, all the new growth, Mantua, there's a new one that's going in next to Mantua. I can't think of the name of it. And all the divisions around it. Well, those are county. They're not city. Now, if it falls within the ETJ, they do have to work with the city in some cases, which I'll have a comment on that one in a second. So then you have where these cities are getting all this influx of people, but there's no room inside this. The city doesn't recoup the city taxes. So, but speaking of ETJs, in case anybody didn't know this, last year a ruling was passed that if someone is in an ETJ, they can petition the city to be removed. So, and pretty much the city has to grant it for the most part.
Yeah, I think I've heard this before also living up north. There's a lot of ins and outs. I'm going to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, we can talk a lot. Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even get to half of my questions today, but I kind of knew that was going to happen anyway.
Is there a question you want to ask?
No, I mean, let's do a wrap-up question.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any? I really feel like they should just call you and refer out the deal after talking with you today. But is there any advice you want to leave realtors with based on our conversation today?
The biggest one I would say is don't be afraid to take on a challenge. But don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. I know, I work for at Properties, Christian International, but I'm very broker agnostic when it comes to helping people. I don't care whose flag you fly. If you have a question, call me.
Okay.
Or reach out to, if you're with KW, reach out to Casey Mock, who heads up the KW Land Division, right? If you're with, I was going to say Compass, you'd reach out to, there's no one here, Greg down in Austin. If you're with, well, that's about all. Yeah. There's really no one else has actually land divisions. But, be willing to take on the challenge and learn because you never know. You may actually like it. So
no, I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying, I don't know, but I'll find the answer for you. It takes unfortunately, it takes a confident person to be able to, I feel like it does. I feel like a lot of people don't have the confidence to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. But I think that's a perfectly acceptable answer.
Oh, it's the only answer in some cases.
Yeah.
And you should be able to, as an adult and as a professional, be able to say, I don't know, and I'll find out.
Well, we'll leave it there for today, but I do reserve the right to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, like I warned you yesterday, we can go down some rabbit holes that we may not get through all the questions.
No, and the investor side of things was really interesting to me because I've thought about land, but as an investor myself, it's not something that I've done because I'm one of those that wants to be educated before I move forward with something.
I'll leave you with this on land. So, and I've had many discussions on this that people disagree with me on. Land does not go down in value, usually. If there's some sort of economic issue or a environmental issue, it can be devalued. But even if you buy land and it just stays the same price for 2 years, that's okay. 3, 4, 5, 6 years, it goes up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. You're not getting that in a CD.
True.
You're not getting that in the stock market. Well, you can, but you're typically not getting that in a stock market. So, if you're willing to take $100,000 or $200,000 and make a monthly payment on it and hold it for 5 to 6 years, it's not a bad investment. And especially if you're in the right spot at the right time.
Well, I don't think real estate in general is a bad investment. At least I've had really good success with it.
And there's the cases where you overbuy and it happens and you lose money. But if you buy smart and you're paying attention, then it's definitely a good investment. So.
Well, Jason, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, ma'am.
It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast. That's a wrap on episode number 82. Again, I'm your host, Tamera Gady. If you like my content, you're really going to love my escrow team. So give me an opportunity to work with you on your title needs and make it a great day.